The piano stopped mid-note when the stranger laughed. It wasn't loud, just sharp enough to cut through the smoky air of the saloon like a knife through cloth. Every man inside felt it in his spine. The laugh came after the taunt, after the mug of whiskey splashed against the old cowboy's boots. The old man didn't move. He didn't even blink. He simply looked down at the spreading stain, then slowly lifted his eyes. In that instant, the West itself seemed to hold its breath. The old cowboy sat alone at the far end of the bar, his back to the wall, the brim of his hat casting his eyes in shadow. His coat was worn thin at the elbows, his boots cracked and dusty. He looked like a man time had forgotten, the kind young guns never worried about. That was why the stranger chose him. The stranger was loud, young, hungry for reputation, and already drunk on both whiskey and arrogance. He had ridden into town that morning with a shiny revolver and a mouth full of stories about how the old days were dead. He wanted to prove it. "Hey, Grandpa," the stranger said, leaning close enough for the whole room to hear. "You spilling that drink yourself, or your hands finally giving up on you?" A few nervous chuckles rippled through the saloon. No one joined in, fully. The bartender froze, wiping the same glass over and over. Men glanced at the door, at the windows, at the floor. Something about the old cowboy's stillness felt wrong. Like standing too close to a sleeping rattlesnake, the old cowboy lifted his head just enough for the light to catch his eyes. They weren't cloudy or weak. They were clear, steady, tired. Yes, but tired in the way mountains are tired of storms. He spoke softly, his voice rough as gravel. "Best you move along, son." That should have been the end of it. Any man with sense would have taken the warning and walked away. But the stranger heard weakness where there was none, puffed his chest, knocked his chair back and laughed again. "Or what?" he said. "Gonna gun me to death?" The old cowboy closed his eyes for a brief moment, not in fear. In memory, years ago his name had been enough to empty rooms. Mothers pulled children inside when they heard his boots on the boardwalk. Sheriffs sent deputies instead of going themselves. He had been fast once, faster than men who thought themselves legends. He had been ruthless when the world demanded it, and merciful when it didn't. Wanted posters had called him a monster, a killer, the West's most wanted man. They never printed the reasons. They never printed the graves he'd dug for brothers and sons, or the promises he'd broken just to survive. He had tried to leave that life behind, tried to bury the name along with the bodies. He'd changed his clothes, changed his towns, changed everything but his bones. And his bones still remembered. The stranger leaned in closer. "I heard men like you used to matter," he said. "Guess that's over." The old cowboy opened his eyes. "You don't know what you're speaking to," he said. The stranger slapped the bar. "I know exactly what I'm speaking to. An old man talking up space." Silence swallowed the room. Somewhere outside, a horse snorted. The piano player slowly slid off the bench. The stranger reached down and hooked his thumb behind the grip of his revolver, not drawing it, just enough to make a point. That was the mistake. The old cowboy moved to anyone watching. It didn't look fast. It looked inevitable. His hand came up, his coat shifted, and the revolver appeared as if it had always been there. One shot, clean, final. The sound cracked through the saloon and echoed down the street. The stranger stood, frozen for a heartbeat, surprise wide in his eyes. Then he fell. No one screamed. No one ran. The old cowboy remained seated, smoke curling from the barrel. He looked down at the body, not with triumph, not with pride, but with something close to regret. "I warned you," he said quietly. The sheriff arrived minutes later, breathless and pale, took one look at the old cowboy, and stopped cold. He knew the face. Older now, lined and scarred, but unmistakable. "It can't be," the sheriff whispered. The old cowboy slowly placed his revolver on the bar. "It is." Word spread fast, faster than fire. By sundown, the town knew who had been sitting among them all these weeks, drinking alone, speaking little, the West's most wanted killer. The man who had vanished years ago after leaving a trail of legends and blood, The townsfolk gathered outside the jail that night, torn between fear and awe. Some wanted him hanged by morning. Others remembered stories their fathers had told of men worse than him who never faced justice of times. When he'd been the only thing standing between order and chaos inside the cell, the old cowboy sat on the cot, hands resting on his knees. He wasn't afraid of dying. He'd made peace with that long ago. What weighed on him was the familiar truth. No matter how far you ride, your past will catch up. A young deputy brought him water. His hands shook. "Why'd you stop?" "Duh," boy asked. "You could have kept running. No one knew." The old cowboy met his eyes. "Because running don't make you free," he said. "It just makes you tired." Morning came slow.
Out.
The crowd outside grew quieter, more thoughtful. When the judge arrived from the next town, he asked for time. He spoke to the old cowboy alone. "You've got 1,000 reasons to hang," the judge said, "and one reason not to." "What's that?" the old cowboy asked. "You've been trying to be better?" The judge sighed. "The man you killed yesterday, he had 3 notches on his gun already. He came here looking to make a name by spilling blood. You stopped that." The old cowboy said nothing by afternoon. The decision was made. No rope, no pardon either. It's just exile. One last chance to keep the peace by staying away from it. The old cowboy walked out of town as the sun dipped low, his hat pulled down, his steps steady. No one cheered. No one jeered. A few men nodded. A woman pressed a canteen into his hand. As he reached the edge of town, he paused and looked back once. Yeah, the West was changing. Saloons would fill with younger men, louder men. But some lessons would remain. Never mistake silence for weakness. Never underestimate the weight a man carries. And never forget that redemption isn't about escaping who you were. It's about choosing who you'll be next. The old cowboy turned toward the open land and walked on. Not as the most wanted killer of the West, but as a man finally at peace. With the price of his past and the promise of what little future remained,